And we're back.
All right.
I have food.
Sounds very epic. We can skip over the flasks and trinkets as we did cover that very well. So moving into skills, I realized I had many pages of questions here, and then I was like, wait, we haven't even talked about like skills here. so much to for us to discover over the course of this beta. How has the list of skills been shaping up overall?
I mean, it's certainly getting there. I mean, look, there are even certain skills that won't even make it, even just within the classes we have. Like, there are still going to be some more skills coming later on as well for these classes, because there are more skills that we got just about there, and didn't quite make it. And like getting a class finished in terms of the skills you need, like. It sort of seems very easy when you come with, like, okay, we need 22, 23, 24, number of skills, something like that. And it seems like that's not so many and you kind of design them. But when you actually come up with all of the things, the way they interact together, the number of prototypes you have to do that kind of don't really work, and you end up not being fun. And then, of course, the support gem stuff, like you need to make sure that every skill has enough viable supports to that you can actually even recommend to people to be able to do. Then you need things like the passive tree support for all of them. You need to have all of the stuff with like the buff gems for each character class as well. You need to be thinking about uniques for the type of that can work with these things. It's just like there's so many different elements to actually make skills work, and once again, it's another area I think that was underestimated to some degree before, and it does take to actually get that finished, it takes a lot. That's been a total struggle, and we didn't think we would have to have only 6 character classes initially at the start of early access. We were thinking we would have 8 to begin with. But when it actually came down to actually getting to actually finish something, it just ended up being too much. Now obviously we've got a bunch of work on more of the classes that we've done. There's things there, but it's that finishing work of like making sure that all the systems in the game come together to support, how that works.
Well,
that requires a lot.
Doing all of that as we're still discovering how we want those systems to work. Like the changes to support gems and all that. As we're also making support gems, as we're making character classes, just can cause things to slow down quite a bit, and then we have to recalibrate and all. It was an extreme amount of work that we certainly predicted poorly, but that was also because we are making all these cool systems to all these changes to all these systems, which are having like immense benefits as well. So,
for sure.
Yeah, I would say it's pretty safe to expect that as much as you can't play them on day 0, some of those other classes that we have shown in the past, and some of the skills and stuff, there's a lot there, like just not to make it seem like it's shallow or anything, but we will be adding those classes in for sure.
Yeah, the thing that keeps like surprising me is, when you click that all gems tab when you're doing an uncut, there's quite a lot of skills in there, but you initially kind of box yourself away where you think, okay, so I'm playing the mercenary, so I'm just looking at the crossbow skills. And then I was like, well, what if I go look at the elemental skills? And then I find flame wall, and I'm like, oh, I can shoot my projectiles through that. Okay, cool. I like that, but that's like surface level, because you also have the weapon swap thing, and that you can actually viably do with the automated weapon swapping. It's not like Toxic where you have to push the button a bunch of times, and you've got the trees that like customize whenever you do it automatically on the fly. So that's like all of a sudden I'm like, oh, well, why can't I use a sword on the other hand?
You absolutely
That's actually a very cool mercenary vibe, sword and crossbow.
So I mean that stuff is crazy. I mean, like in the actually there was one in the community guys recorded where they were using a bell, the bell skill with the quarterstaff.
Sick.
With the rapid shot mercenary skill. And when I saw it, I was like, oh man, that's like a whole other thing. Like that I didn't even know about that particular combo until I saw it in the some of the footage they recorded.
I started thinking about that too with like multiplayer, and I was like, so I was throwing my gas grenades, which you can blow up with your explosive grenades, but then I was throwing it at a boss that was doing burning ground, and they were blowing up instantly. I'm like, oh wait, so it reacts to the environment. Well, it's obviously going to react to my friends doing burning ground then. So
and
my flame wall friend.
And this is the reason, like this conversation here is the reason why there's going to be crazy builds that we don't anticipate, because like some of the stuff that can happen between classes, I just have no doubt we will not have discovered.
How much co-op have you really been able to test?
I mean, we do test party play all the time. Like in Mark's Mark's like,
But to find all those.
I'm the support character player.
yeah.
Now I'm like freezing, armor breaking, putting down clouds, slow. You know, I'm like, holy, there's just a lot
Lots
going
of
on all
options
of a
for
sudden.
that.
I'm not just standing there like I got buffs coming out of me. You know, it's like you know, you're like. I'm actually doing all this active support and like different conditions to synergize with the group and how it's like, oh, okay, you're doing that skill. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do this and enhance my armor breaking and go ballistic armor breaking, and you just spam your thing that consumes it. You know, so you get a lot of that stuff going on for sure. Where but you know, it's kind of honestly the terrifying part as well, where it's like. You know, what do we have? We had the whole like vulnerability curse with gas cloud ticks or something, and it was like literally applying armor break like every frame, and so you have the monsters going ting ting ting
And then
ting
you
ting
have
ting.
armor
ting.
explosion on there as well.
Yeah, and then you have
probably.
some other thing, and you have some other guy consuming it, and again, oh my god, Quill Rain! Just don't even how many bloody synergistic things with Quill Rain.
You can do a lot with that,
All the lightning arrows on the ground, and because they can, you know, lightning things hit them and explode, and all of a sudden now everyone's running around with Quill Rain, spamming lightning rods everywhere, and.
Yeah.
And Frostwall. Somehow Frostwall had about 15 abuse cases. And
I mean, that's historically accurate.
yeah, true.
Kinetic blast, frost walls, and all that. It returns. Sounds like it's coming back.
It'll be fun.
Yeah.
It's cool. Even finding all the stuff so far has been really fun. But yeah, I generally play multiplayer. Most of the alpha I've done is being in multiplayer. Play with other people. It's good to get a lot of that testing in there as well because not a lot of others do it.
That's really good.
And then try and see what we can break, just for good fun. Honestly, the thing it's like hard is to then like, because you get this thing which is quite interesting where you have a staff is both a player and a developer, and I'm of the like, don't you better not keep that you know, something that's I wouldn't say exploit, but you know, something that's OP, a secret, right? You better bloody tell me, because
it's the exact reaction you had earlier.
You were saying people weren't telling you about their good
like
builds.
you get a situation where someone doesn't want to tell you about their build. That's because they're like, oh, Mark will nerf it then. You know,
like you're supposed to be making game, not
Exactly.
hiding your good
I
builds.
legitimately had a Monday meeting, and you know, whatever.
You're a
And I was like.
developer.
I swear, if I see any of you at the top of the ladder on day one, we're going to have a talk.
exactly.
I know you've hidden something from me.
Exactly.
No, I did tell you about my flashbangs and how good.
But
they
maybe
are.
it's fine. I just wanted them to check. Just
Well, that's the
don't
thing.
know
No,
if
that
I
is the thing that is hard. No one knows if their thing is actually look, there's a line that gets crossed, yes.
Yeah.
But sometimes you don't know. Is it just I've found something cool and it's powerful, or have I found something cool and it's broken? You know, and those things. I mean, we have to make those decisions, of course. And a lot of the time, what is reported is just fine. And it's like, yeah, you got a good weapon, and you got this combo. You're strong.
If it's supported by items, then it's like fine to be very powerful. But if you're just like, I just pick these skills, and no matter what weapons I'm wearing, I'm just like completely ridiculous, then that's a different situation. Because now it's just a thing that anyone can do at a moment's notice, rather than actually requiring like, you know, oh, I have to find this combo of items and things like that. So that's a much different story.
But no, we've had a lot of good testing, a lot of good feedback, a lot of good people reporting that stuff, especially in the last like month. It's like coming in a lot because as the systems and everything's kind of stabilizing, you start to get a lot more of that, and people are understanding what the difficulties meant to be and what the power of characters is meant to be. As all of that came and started to stabilize, we got a lot more of this coming in, and we are kind of getting more understanding. But again, you'll never find them all. But you know, it's fun, good fun journey.
Support gems have changed a lot. How have you found the changes to them being now having no levels and the restriction of having only one support gem on your character of a type, but having a lot more of them?
I really like how this works. Like, I think that it adds so much more build diversity and interest to have to be making the decision of like, you know, where is this going to go? And the thing that's been important though with that system is it requires a lot more support gems to exist because you only have one on your character. You need tons of them, and like you need a lot of different ways to increase damage and a lot of ways to support different mechanics. It's like if you're going to have something like freeze, like, you know, if you're going to have a freezing skill, you need to be able to support that and augment that in like many different ways. And there needs to be more options than what you can even like. There needs to be, in order to have choice, you can't just have here's your 5 freeze things and that's all you do, right? There has to be more than that in order to be able to have it so you actually have some choices as well. So that kind of stuff has meant that you just need a lot of things going on there. But I think that the choices that you end up with as a player of like, you know, where do I put my model projectiles? Where do I put my PS? Where do I put, like, I think that leads to a lot more interesting decisions with how you build. And
it's probably one of the best things
you know, like
they've done.
I think that to me is where a lot of why it just works so much better. And
Support,
we were certainly hesitant about
gems.
the whole, you can only have one support per character thing, because it sounds bad if you just hear about it as a player without actually playing it.
Yeah.
Your first reaction is you just hear that and you're like, oh, it's just a restriction. And it is arbitrary in some sense, right? There's no like, we can't justify it thematically, really. It just is what it is, and so I really don't like that kind of thing usually, because I want the theme to match the mechanic as much as possible. But in this case, it just made the gameplay so much better that like it just had to happen. So it was
arguably, if you need to, like, if you end up in a situation where you like, I have to put the support on every slot.
Exactly, that is less choice, and that's the reason why the gameplay is
less
bad.
choice, less interest, and also you may as well just bake that now into the skills and or
100%. And so this is the thing. It is actually much worse to have that, because it results in this outcome. But like, that's a kind of more subtle argument that like you have to kind of make to people if you want to kind of convince them that this is actually the right way. Because when you tell people, oh, there's
it's
this
obviously the right way.
Sound like what they're getting out of that is more choice. It sounds like they're getting less. But the reality is, it is actually more choice, because you no longer have like mandatory, like here's the 5 mandatory things you have to put on the skill. It's like there's actually much more going on.
I think it's much better helped realize my experience.
All projectile skills would have GMP. Now you can just put GMP on one skill. So much. That's 10 times better.
That your vision of
and then
having,
if they
like,
want to,
all
they
these
can
skills
have unique
available to
items,
you,
and
and them
makes
actually
it so you can
being worth
put
using.
GMP on 2.
Because if you had all the same support gems, I feel like you just pick the one that does the most damage and you make it do the most damage, and that's the only skill you use.
Yeah, and I mean, the great thing is now it's completely reasonable to have a skill in your character that you just use occasionally, right? Like every 5 minutes you might have a situation where you need to use that, and that's actually fine and completely reasonable.
Yeah, so I'm playing a Grenader, and I would be like, okay, I should only use this grenade normally, is what I would be like in Path of Exile, because this is the best grenade, or maybe this one that does like interacts with it in some way, the obvious combo. But now I'm actually like, well, there's a reason I could use those lightning ones to apply shock, because I have all these shock support gems that I'm not using anywhere else, because I'm using the damage and the LMP on my big damage dealers. I can put the shock things on there, and I can actually have a shock setup. I can incorporate that into my build.
100%.
I can incorporate poison into my build to strip their armor and whatnot, and that
maybe
you
only use that occasionally when you face something that's got heavy armor, you know.
But
it's like it's like that kind of stuff I really want to be viable, and that situational stuff I think just makes the game way more interesting.
It's really feeding into the flavor of the mercenary, is like this like prepared kind of fighter who has all these tools at their disposal as well. Like you're like, oh, I have this grenade for if I get into this situation, and this grenade for this one. It's so good.
Yeah, nice.
I love it. I've a couple of questions here. People definitely have been asking about like Vile skills and transfigured gems and stuff and like that. I feel like this sort of thing doesn't make sense at launch exactly.
Yeah, because ultimately, if we were going to add something like that, it would make sense to add it just as another skill. So at this point, there's no real reason to do that. Like that kind of stuff comes in when we want to have a specific reward system somewhere that wants to be able to do that, and so we don't really need to do it right now. But look, we might decide to bring that theme back in in a reward system later.
Yeah, I think
like
for Vile skills especially, it's a cool flavor.
Yeah, for sure.
Like
but I think the transfigured thing is also interesting. Like if you're looking to be able to like the reason why transfigured was nice is because it's like we got to sort of iterate on a bunch of different themes around the same skill. Which obviously at this point we don't need to do that because we're already just having to make still adding the skills. You know what I mean? So all the iterations of it are like less of a necessary thing. But I mean, I'm sure we'll be doing more stuff like that in the future. Like we absolutely will be.
Do you know how many skills roughly you have / are going to end up with?
I actually don't know the number off the top of my head. But what I will say is that we initially, I think, when we announced like what the full game would have, we said 240. And I'm pretty sure we're actually nearing that. I feel
definitely it's going to be way higher than that.
Yeah, because I think we're nearing that now when we've only added half the classes. So I think that means that there's going to be a lot more than that.
I know 100 of them or whatever are like some little utility skill or whatever, but there's even if you discount for those, it's
I know. No, that's a lot.
You
got what like
because there's 20 to 25 for each of those for each class. So just with 6 of those, I'm terrible at math in my head. But I feel like that's 120. Well, let's say it's just a bit over 110 or something. Like, end up around there, 120, something like that. I think probably 120. Around there, like that. But then you've also got all the buff gems as well, and like each character class has 9 of those. So that then sort of adds up. And so you've already reached probably 200 just by the time you've got to there. And then it doesn't even count things that really are skills, but like are not. You don't get them via a skill gem. So like we're talking about all the ascendancy little skills, and there's like uniques that have little skill things on them.
All all staffs, wands, and
Oh yeah,
scepters
there's a
have a
staff one,
skill
exactly.
baked
Right? We're
in.
not even counting that, right? Like, because the staffs one and scepters have skills built in.
Yeah.
And then those are like, that's another. How many of those? There's like 20 of those probably.
Yeah, I mean,
like if you add them all up.
I don't know who remembers all these
Yeah,
things.
I know, but no one has counted recently. But there's a bunch.
Countless skills.
Ascendancy classes with skills.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's
true.
tons.
Yeah.
It's tons.
Yeah.
Someone
And
in
those
chat
skills, by the way, ascendancy class skills are fully supportable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild because I remember
Yep.
you did the thing with default attack where you can support that now.
Yep,
if
you can
want.
support default attack, and you can support
the
any skill
ascendancy
that comes
ones
from
was-
something.
That one caught me by surprise. I was like, oh wow,
Yep.
you can actually link those up.
Yep, it's so that you're going to end up with quite a lot going on there.
I was even surprised when I was like, oh, I can add additional accuracy to Herald of Ice, and it like provides a buff to my character. I
Yep.
can like add buffs through support gems.
Well, you know why that is though, because those things like heralds are so hard to find like a good set of supports to recommend.
Yeah,
so we're like, damn, we have to come up with like tons of these now.
I
They're like
that,
really
I like that
difficult.
idea though. You can like create a custom aura.
Yeah,
kind of.
absolutely.
cool.
So yeah, it's that actually mean it's actually nice because part of the it means that you get the feeling of having more aura effects on your character without having to have the spam of actual auras that many characters had in PoE1. Like you get to kind of have all that stuff as well. So that's been really nice.
Thanks for the invisible aura MTX. Well, it does remind me though. So with all the this is very off topic, but with all the very good teasers you've been doing for like new 3D art for uniques and stuff like that, have you had any thoughts about reworking the skin transfer MTX in some way, making it more permanent? More
Honestly,
able to, like,
it's not in our thing about
Haven't even
stuff
thought
we're
about
thinking
it?
about. You know, like it'll work the same way it works for now, at least. But obviously, skin transfer in PoE2, there's a lot more cool base art.
Yeah,
that's
going to make
uniques
people
and stuff
actually
that you
want to
wanna
use it now.
So
I
yeah,
feel
you'll
so.
probably be using that a lot more.
So yeah, it'd be cool to see something for that in the future potentially. So onto the end game, which was I feel like a big bulk of the announcement
For sure.
here. So just as like an overview, so we have the end game versions just for beta launch, by the way.
Yeah,
Because it's going to be a lot more later.
yeah.
We have the end game pinnacle versions of the two trials.
Yep.
So as like fully farmable content. They don't have trees though. Those ones.
They don't have trees, but they do have a progression system of some kind. So you've got the
Yeah, like
relics,
relics,
in the Sanctum sequel, and then for the Trial of Chaos, you have the inscribed ultimatums have getting mods from the end. So when you kill the final the final boss of that, which is alleged to be the Trial Master, then you
Alleged.
yeah, then he'll drop items that can then have mods on them to make the trial itself harder. And there's also some pretty interesting ones on there that we actually were going to put in the video, but it was starting to get a bit long. Which was that you've got the thing which where you've got the bets that you can make of like put up 13 exalts, and then you might get double that back if you're able to complete the thing. So those are some of the mods that can spawn on there,
that's
and
cool.
as well as mods that make the actual trial harder as well. So there's things like that as well. So yeah, those two have those kind of like different outside the atlas tree because they're not really part of the atlas. Like you'll get keys for them while you're playing in game, but technically speaking, they're kind of like they scale to in game, but they're not like sort of part of the whole atlas.
Yeah.
You don't like play them there.
Yeah, so they're their own distinct
yeah,
endgame
exactly,
too. Like,
exactly.
So there'll be 3 roguelike dungeon things that will be
Sure.
like
Or,
distinct
I mean,
endgames.
I wouldn't say 3 roguelike dungeons. I will say there will be 3 trials that have various mechanics that can be different.
Yeah.
But then of course you've got the 4 kind of what I guess would say sort of. I don't know. We actually need a name for what are we calling the things that are icons on the
because they were called leagues, but they're not really
yeah, it
leagues.
doesn't really make
'cause
sense to call it a league exactly. That is what we call them internally. We just call refer to them as like there are 4 leagues that you have that appear there.
doesn't really work anymore, does it?
I don't have a good idea right now.
Yeah, we'll need to come up with a
we
name for
probably
that.
have actually named it. I just don't remember what it is.
Right. And then you've got the kind of boss hunting kind of element as well. And then the kind of, I guess what you would say is the pinnacle of the kind of boss hunting thing is then, you've got the cities with the lieutenants and then the Uber Act bosses. And then above that, you have the pinnacle boss who we don't want to spoil. Although I did show you a little bit about it just in private before. Yeah, that's that one's going to be hard. Like I know you're cooking up some pretty difficult mechanics there.
Yeah, it's fun. That's the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Because now you don't need to worry about if people can't progress through. It's not a progression blocker. You can just kill them.
Yeah. It's a progression blocker to difficulty to the higher difficulties though, because once you kill that,
That's
of course,
true.
then you get the increase of the difficulties, and then it's like, okay, now try it again, but way harder, and then and then there's four levels of difficulty for each of those for each endgame system like that.
So yeah, like apart from the trials, the endgame trials, everything has like its own distinct passive tree, and
Yes.
progression through them is also by doing them.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So we really wanted to prevent the situation where you feel like you allocate points for a certain piece of content, and then you feel like you can't do the other content because you're kind of wasting the points that you've got.
Yeah, the lock-in.
And we kind of band-aided that in PoE 1 by adding multiple Atlas trees as a way. But I think the solution is much better, where effectively you can progress all of them, and you can either do like, just all in one for a while, or you can just like, do each of them as you come to them, and, just add them kind of piecemeal. But either way, however you want to do it, you can make progress on your character, well, I should say in your league for all of those, because the progress and all that stuff is, of course, for the whole league, not just for a single character within it.
Yeah, and previously we used the Atlas tree, I would say very much so, to make sure that we were doing the type of content that we wanted to do.
Yeah, so now it's not so much about finding the content, because that's what the tablets are for.
Yeah.
Now it's more about improving your ability to sustain effectively. Like you're going to want to have those points to sort of get sustainability for the next level up, and we want to make sure that there is sustain if you're doing engaging with those mechanics well.
Yeah.
But effectively you do have to actually like to get sustain at higher difficulties. You will need to be able to be making smart choices in terms of allocating and like using the tablets correctly and that kind of stuff. Like it is part of that sort of story.
Hopefully, you're not forced into doing the higher
that's kind of
difficulty
the main thing with
ones.
Yeah,
You
this
can
idea of like sustaining the
stay at
content you want
one
to do by doing it
difficulty.
is a little
Back
different to
down if
how it's
you're
been in
starting
Period all
out
the time,
with a
where
new
it's like
character.
you had to fuel it by going back to maps to
Right.
get your delve juice.
I mean,
or
you're
whatever.
still doing maps ultimately,
Yeah,
in terms
like
of like,
to find
but yeah,
more.
but effectively, like, so long as you're doing the content that you that you want to do, you should, and as well, and making it harder. So your build has to be good enough to be able to sustain it. Those hard, then you will be able to sustain that stuff. And like if you want every single map to have a breach in it, that's absolutely doable. By using the tablets correctly.
Yeah, so the Atlas passive trees and the trees for each of the distinct types of content is about scaling the reward and difficulty primarily. Now.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And what does I saw like on the breach nodes? It said like increased difficulty. What does that mean?
It's somewhat arbitrary and asymmetric, but it will feel like, for example, some of the difficulties will actually change the boss's skills and how they work.
Wow.
Generally, they'll increase like the level of the area, right? So you get the general monster and life scaling, but arguably to a player that's arbitrary as well, because they don't know how that scales. And in other contexts, it might be more of certain monster types, less of others, and stuff like that. It is generally so the small nodes will increase difficulty of the meta content, whereas the notables will increase the reward of the in-map content. But when I say difficulty, that is reward as well. So an example of how this works is like, let's say the boss has 6 uniques it could drop, or 5 or 6 uniques. It can drop 3 at difficulty 0. Then at, say, difficulty 1, it can drop, maybe has increased level or higher item level, some rarity. Now also that, when I say rarity, also do note rarity does increase the grade of items, not just
that's wild.
making them yellow or orange. It does make them better yellows or better, not
Affects
better
the
oranges.
modifiers, right?
But it does affect. Yeah, it affects other things about items than just the rarity.
Yes. And so, when I talk about just getting rarity here, I don't want people to, and PoE1 players in particular, to think, they're just going to go from yellow to more yellow. So anyway, and, maybe the next tier will add a unique to the pool, like a more, what we hope will be more valuable unique. And then the next one can do a bit more rarity, something else maybe, introduce a different unique perhaps. And then the last difficulty introduces something ideally, without giving away exact specifics of them, more in the line of a modular unique item, say like Megalomaniac or like Forbidden Flesh and Flame from PoE 1. So a unique item that is like ideally very powerful, very chase, but has a lot of different combinations. Watcher's Eye is another good example, right?
Those are
So
my
a new series of jewels is a good example. There are other uniques that are modular and stuff, and that comes in at the last tier. And so you want to really be getting to that hardest difficulty so you can be getting these like farming for these extremely good, powerful, unique items. But of course, you have the thing, if you're never ready for it, if you try it and you're like, oh, this is too hard, you can always just respec the nodes.
Yeah, you can unspec them away and then not, just effectively decide, like, I've got these points, but I'm not, I want to go back and do this later. And so that ability to effectively configure the difficulty like that, I think, is...
So if you're maybe target farming one
okay.
of the base, one of the units, the
answered my-
difficulty 0 drops, you might want to just be like, I'll do that.
Questions.
I'll do the difficulty stuff later, and I'll just farm it at this difficulty. So
And I think that's a much better way than than some of the systems we've used to scale down in the past. And the nice thing is, of course, with difficulty is that we can effectively use whatever scaling levers we want to make that more difficult without necessarily having to, like because we could have been like, oh, you increase difficulty, it's like 200% life or something like that. But by effectively being a bit more vague about it, we can actually like specifically tailor the difficulties of the different tiers, like, with more specific changes.
Yeah, this like multiple projectile thing he shoots has more projectiles.
Sure, and that kind of thing. So, just whatever we feel works best for making this particular fight more difficult.
It seems like there's a lot more for players to kind of discover experimentally there as they progress.
For sure.
In what ways
cool.
they're getting harder. And that is going to be different for different players too, where like a different build is affected by a difficulty change more so than others.
Potentially.
And that's an interesting question as well, I think, where how much are you guys pitching these sorts of distinct endgame pieces of content at being like completable by the same build or by encouraging players to make a different build that's better at certain
So
content?
this is a very difficult one, and it's something that
Dual wielding two-handers with the dual strike. Okay. Just thought of that right now.
we've discussed a bit recently is like, the harder you make the hardest content, the less builds will be considered viable by the players, because effectively, like, a build's only viable if it can defeat, like, the pinnacle boss at difficulty 4. Like, that will be kind of the general perception. So we have to be really, like, I actually don't know necessarily what the right answer here is.
Yeah.
Like, we have the ability. I mean, maybe you feel like you do, but I don't think you do.
I wouldn't say I'm 100% confident on it, but
Right.
I'll have a go at it.
Look, there's going to be iteration here, because what we'll see is, like, if we find that, like, there's only, like, some particularly abusive, like, only the most abusive stuff is possibly able to defeat the hardest content, then we might have to dial it back a bit.
Yeah.
But it's kind of going to be a bit of experimentation, and it's very hard at this point to be able to pitch that, because we don't have the crazy history. PoE does not have the history of PoE 1 to be able to, to know kind of what is the right life value to have on a difficulty 4 pinnacle boss. Like, how do we even know that at this point, really, without,
That being said, though, like, the bosses are a lot more skill-based and tactical, right? Like, at the end of the day, the gear is, to some degree, necessary because no one can really make no mistake for some amount of time. So you do have that thing, and you do need to mitigate certain things. But, like, a lot of these are, like, very dodge roll tactical, or using certain skills or mitigation tactics or whatever. There's heaps of different things to bypass the things that make them hard, for sure. But I would say it is very much, a lot of skill is involved, especially when it comes to some of these with dodge rolling. Like, I'm trying to emphasize that quite a bit. Or blocking, if you want to do a different way about it. Not to say you must block, but yes, dodge roll is a pretty key mechanic here, and I'd say we're certainly upping the emphasis on using it and using it well as you get into these higher tiers. But gear is always a way, and combinations of uniques and passive tree and builds is always a way to go, I'm not good at dodge rolling, I'm going to gear around that skill check and become strong enough to defeat the boss.
Or another skill, like some sort of skill that helps you block.
Or
shield block,
using skills in the mix is fine. But I would say pretty generally you can take, I'd say, any decent character, you get you gear up all the way, and as long as you're good enough, that is a way to defeat them. I would say there's no real hard requirement on doing something crazy niche or out there or complicated.
You're certainly not going the route of like, oh, this boss is fire immune or something.
Oh, no.
Thanks.
No.
We've been through that already.
Yeah.
Excellent. So this very cute atlas, this infinitely expanding civilization map-esque atlas, which I know you're particularly fond of, Jonathan.
Yep.
What's kind of the idea here? Like, is the layout the same for everyone? Is it the same across the league?
So it's the
Procedurally
same for all
generated?
your characters in the league, but the layout is different for everyone. It is random.
Okay.
So you're gonna have to find stuff. Like, it works like Delve in this respect, which is obviously a league that I was particularly a fan of.
Yeah.
I'm just a really, what I really wanted is I wanted a feeling of exploration in the atlas, and it's something that we sort of tried to do with the Atlas and PoE 1, with that feeling of kind of, having the connected areas and exploring, but it didn't feel like exploration in quite the same way that this does.
Yeah.
So that's a feeling I loved, and it's one of the reasons I love Delve. So that's, kind of where this was coming from. And at the same time, it's sort of solving various other problems that we've always had where, one of the things that's really cool to do is to be able to have things like, okay, like in this area, you've got like this item drops and like that kind of thing. Like I guess in PoE 1 you had div cards, but yet there was always a problem where if you have differences between in-game areas in a system that works like PoE 1 does, then effectively that's the only map people like whatever the best map is, that's the one everyone will run like continuously forever.
Yep.
So effectively, we wanted to try and make sure that you actually like had an experience that had more variety while still retaining the whole like I get to play the content that I want. So ideally with the Atlas, we kind of get that we've got in PoE 2, we get to kind of have both of the best of both worlds. We get to make sure that there is some variety. You feel like you're exploring. But because once you've run a map, that's run, and now you have to move on and do it and find another one. It's not just like just play one map again and again and again. But yet the content can be added to it. You can do things if you like the particular maps, because there are biomes and you can see them from far away. You can be like, okay, I know there's a particular desert map that's great, so I'm going to go for deserts, and that's fine. You can do that kind of thing. So like you've both got controllability, but also the ability for us to kind of make more variants.
You get a lot more very high satisfying spikes.
Yeah.
Where, like, for example, you get more variables where you just have, okay, there are like 4 towers, really. You've got a good tower cluster, and you've got really good maps in that range. So, like, there are maps. So, in Path of Exile 1, for example, the range is effectively, say, how do I quantify this? Like, say, 350 monsters up to 700 monsters.
Yeah.
Whereas the range here is like 300 monsters up to like 1,500 monsters, much more drastic range. Now, those numbers are arbitrary, but it is approximately the representation of the range. Obviously, you then modify it and add more to it and all of that. So you will have some maps that are like extremely good with Delirium, and some maps that are like way better with something more like Breach.
Yeah.
Because Delirium enhances the monsters of the map, whereas Breach entirely adds the monsters. And you will even have things where there are maps that are like way more magic monsters, way more rare monsters. And so you probably want that with, pick your league of your choosing and whatnot. You have all these variables that are at play, and so you'll all of a sudden find a really good set of towers with some really good maps and radius, and then you'll get really good tablet modifiers, and then you'll get really good maps with really good prefixes, and you want to just combine all of this and you obviously instill them all, and you corrupt them all. And there's the corruption influence.
We didn't show that,
and so
did we?
then there's the corruption influence on them. And it's like, okay, like...
It is possible for there on one map to be many, many mechanics stacked to the point of craziness.
So it sounds like the juicing is definitely there.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's important, right? I mean, like, that's part of the PoE experience. But, yeah, for 100%.
But how much control do you have as a player, though, over min-maxing your just exploration of the Atlas map?
So effectively,
can you do better in some way?
So effectively, what you're going to want to do is the towers are where you go to like see areas around, and then there's the structure of the connections is quite open. So like you can beeline for things pretty well.
Yeah.
Like if you you can certainly see a lot more maps than what you play, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So because of that, choosing what you want is easy to do.
And you can kind of see the towers in the fog.
Yeah, so you can see the towers in the fog from a distance, which means that like a lot of the time it's like go to a tower, you'll see some maps you want to play, you go play those, then it's like the next tower is just a few other maps away. Go to that tower, see the next area, and so on.
I'm guessing that's like a certain range out you can see. Into the fog of war.
The fog kind of in 3D kind of the fog's actually a 3D thing, and it rises slowly as you get away from where the thing is. So that's how you kind of get the towers to.
Cool. So you might see a cluster of towers off somewhere. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. You can see that.
It sounds like this is like potentially an infinitely expanding map that is going to be by the end of someone's league quite big.
Yes. So we actually need to add a search feature. I don't know if they've done it yet for finding specific maps that haven't been run yet.
Yeah,
we have a few things. Like there's a button you can press and it like goes to your last map run, one that goes back to a home base, and one that goes to some of the special, more iconic things you find. But we certainly need more. 100%. So that is something we will be working on. Hopefully it's there. Who knows?
And so Waystones have a tier, but they don't have specific maps on them anymore,
Yes.
which obviously shrinks that whole map pool thing down
Yes.
substantially.
Yep,
What sort of impact does that have?
it'll make the map stash tab a little easier to manage. That's good.
Yeah, so have you thought about like what sort of, I don't know, economic consequences that have for like how players progress through maps? Is it easier to do when you don't have to collect all of these individual maps to get the completion bonuses and stuff like we do currently? Like we have that whole, hunting down over 100 maps to get completion for. That's
I mean,
thing.
yeah, now you're hunting, you're hunting certain valuable maps, you're hunting towers, you're hunting content, you're hunting, the warlord, the faction leaders to get the pinnacle.
Yeah.
You're hunting unique maps, a very different thing for sure. As opposed to, and then
Sounds
the
more
item is
interesting.
all about, I've just got a key, I just want good modifiers. There's not really all that whole other variable to it. So there's still a lot of interesting choice and access, but we've taken it from the item and put it on the actual world map. But it's cool. It also makes you just feel like you're traversing a world. You're not instantly like finishing the campaign, very grounded, and now I'm in space. Like Path of Exile does have that.
I only literally just thought about that. I was going to ask about that. So, the mapping system was always this like extra dimensional kind
Yes.
of unknown thing. It's pretty interesting, but it is a little
So
weird.
we wanted to start with to actually like at least. I mean, look, I'm sure we'll get to the extra dimensional beings eventually, but at least to start with, we wanted to have a bit more grounded initially.
Yes, you're on the planet.
Yeah.
Right, you're in
You're
raid-
on the
you're-
planet.
you're
That's
in
like a
raid
good
class.
thing. We have
This is
become a
the bar we've
sci-fi
gotten
crazy,
to.
but yeah. You haven't gone to the moon yet.
Yes, not yet. Well, even then we were saying like, can we at least before we go to outer space, go to the moon first? Like, actually, how many moons are we don't? We,
Yeah.
There's a whole complicated thing we need to figure out there.
Wow. I feel like there's a delve but up league coming. All right. So we've got this 1 in 4 maps is boss maps, and
Yes.
then that means the other 3 are not boss maps.
Yes.
What does a non-boss map look like? How do you win it?
So effectively, what you need to do is kill the rares in the map to remove the corruption and finish it. Once you get down below 50 monsters, it will point out any rares that are remaining. They'll be like a
good.
marker, just so you know.
I was worried
but
about that.
honestly, I wouldn't expect that to even be necessary most of the time because the layouts are kind of designed so that if you generally speaking you want to clear the maps to find the rares anyway because those are the one those have good drops and effectively. The only reason that you would need that marker thing is just occasionally you get some slightly weird degenerate layout where there's some side bit you didn't notice or something like that, and then that's where you have to go. So generally speaking, you'll be able to make your way around and kill them all.
The goal of the player is you're cleansing corruption from the world, you're bringing order back, stuff like that. So you even get the thing on the map where you're like, if there's some corruption-y looking stuff around the map, when you complete the map, that gets purged away. So you feel like you're reverse painting the map a little bit. And
We're
you're
cleaning up.
it can actually be quite satisfying as you're like changing all the nodes from one color to another, and you're like, yeah, this is fun. I'm like,
But ultimately, what we wanted to do is we wanted boss combat in PoE 2 to matter when we have it.
Yeah.
And so in order, like if you have a map boss every area, then if we made it so the boss combat mattered enough, like in order to actually balance it
it's
that way,
stressful.
It's too much. Like it actually is
Yeah.
like, you spend too much of your time fighting bosses.
Yeah.
So effectively, if that's what you want to do now, you can do it because there's bosses there. Like when I say 1 in 4 maps is a map boss, that doesn't mean that 1 in 4 maps you play is one. Because, obviously you can pick what content you're doing by exploring
you can
around.
chain
You're
the
picking
map
your
boss.
pathing and your
Path.
Exactly. So effectively, if you want to hunt the bosses, then that is the thing you can do. If you want to just like do some mindless grinding for a while, you can do
Yeah.
that too. And what it means is we can actually make the bosses way more rewarding. They can drop way more items than they were going to because of the fact that there's not one at the end of every area, right? Like we can actually, and the fight is substantial. You get a lot of drops. That actually is something.
and
that,
they get their own tree.
and they, what? Oh yeah, I don't know. Right, you mean the boss killing tree? Yes, there's a tree for boss hunting. Sorry, I thought you meant every boss had its own tree. And I was like, geez, did you do
That's
some
the
design
next
while I
step.
wasn't
Not
while I was looking?
yet.
Not yet.
Jonathan's like, wait, no, wait, stop.
Yeah,
It's too much.
Jeez.
That's like a year 3 feature.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we'll keep
Yeah,
that
yeah.
in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's actually like I do love that there's a boss hunting because I'm super into that. There's a boss hunting tree that you can fill out as well. So how do you get points on that? Like,
Yeah, so effectively, I mean, well, you can.
You get a lot of points for the core tree. There's a core tree that affects all mapping. That all of things like pack size, quant rarity, and you've got multiple keystones that can work together, and all can. So I think there's 3 of them. One plays on like corrupted maps. One plays on like prefixes and suffixes, and I can't remember what the other one does right in this very moment. But you obviously get that core tree, and then you have a boss tree, and then obviously all the different league and pinnacle content trees. So you get those points by just completing maps. It just has you effectively get a quest. and effectively it's like you complete 10 maps, you get your first 2 points, and then like complete X maps and one, goes up the chain.
But of certain tiers, like
Yeah.
basically
Of at least
this is
tier
the-
1,
this
at
is
least
the-
tier
yeah.
2, at
So
least
this is the
tier
tier
3.
climb
Yep.
effectively, where it's like as you get up the higher tiers and clear maps of certain tiers, that's when you start getting points
And
for
then
the Atlas.
at like maybe say the third one, I can't remember the exact specifics. It's like complete this and defeat a boss, and then later it's defeat at least 5 bosses at something, and so killing bosses get generated.
It sounds way better for fresh starts. I'm not having to like go and get that estuary map that I missed or something. It's
yeah,
like,
for sure.
I'm just doing content. I'm
But
just
it
doing
is,
good
but
content.
it
I
is
wanna do.
kind of the analog of that in a way, because like it's that feeling of like I've got a system to progress through. Like I just
Yeah.
I need to meet these
Well,
objectives, and
definitely got a lot of
and I'm getting
progression.
and from that you're getting the the Atlas passive points and so on.
Cool.
So yeah, that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, so you can really like focus in on map blasting with the bossless maps, and or on bossing content if you want to, or on breaches, or
Yeah, sure.
on
And you can always put a
Ritual.
breach on a map with a boss, right? You can do both.
Yeah,
It's
like
not
they can have
that's-
all. You can have every type of content in one map if you want.
yeah. Is like a boss map a kind of like a distinct thing from like a regular map in terms of like the layout or the thing you've done?
Technically, they are separate, but generally speaking, like
be like
that-
similar
Yeah,
versions
they're
of
basically the
They're
same.
pretty
but
similar,
They're pretty
yeah.
similar.
So
but
there'll be like a boss
the,
estuary and a non-boss estuary.
Yeah, there are some cases at the moment where there are some maps that can't have a boss, and because
Yeah,
just we haven't done the one that would go here is not in early access yet, and that kind of thing. But effectively, as I said, generally speaking, it'll be 1 and 4 that you'll find.
Okay, excellent. So I think that covers. Did I miss some things from? You've got like all the smaller contents, like the
Yeah.
strong boxes and essences and
Yeah,
things
yeah.
like
So
that. coming back as
initially,
well.
we actually had a design where everything, like even all the smaller content, there was still going to be icons for it on the tree. Sorry, on the Atlas.
Yeah.
But we actually found that it meant that when you were actually exploring, it felt like there was nothing random to find. So we wanted to make sure we also have kind of just completely random stuff that
Yeah.
like doesn't have a progression system that you just run into randomly, because that's fun too. And we'll probably be adding more stuff like that as well over time. That's just like I randomly encountered this, and that was like not expected. So
Is that sort of stuff on the core Atlas tree at
yeah.
all? Yeah, so you can kind of like see more of that if you want
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
Yep.
Great.
And often mods on the items as well. On keep waystones.
Yeah, cool. Yep.
Lots of different names. Maps, waystones, same thing.
Yes, I've had to keep kind of correcting myself about that. I was like,
Yep.
I don't know.
I mean,
guess
look,
these aren't really called
internally,
maps anymore.
we definitely call them maps all the time. The thing is the only reason why it doesn't make sense thematically is because a map does imply it's of a specific location, whereas a waystone
Yeah.
can take you to anywhere.
Yes.
So that's the reason why the name change had to happen. But I think that probably even players will probably just call them maps, I bet, just because, that's the PoE1 connection.
So we've got the Breach, Delirium, Ritual, Expedition, those like leagues that maybe need a new name.
Yep.
Is there another one that you're just both personally really keen to bring back in the future?
Oh, I mean, like I've always wanted to have Delve again, but I kind of got a bit of that wish with this system.
Yeah.
It's also a very like content heavy league to make, because you need to make tons of encounters, and like doing
there's
it
a lot
properly is a
there.
huge thing. But I mean, look, I love Incursion as well. It's one of my favorites. Like I'm keen for that. I don't know if there's anything other than that you're really keen for.
There's a lot, especially because there's a lot we can do with all this new art, new monsters, right? Like, for example, if you just take Legion had all those 5 civilizations. We've now got an entire new array of Vile monsters, Vile bosses, etc., that we can use as a baseline. We've got way better consistent direction on what's going on there, heaps of stuff, new animation, and the capacities are just like out of control. But then you've got Incursion, we've got awesome Vile artwork we can use there and make that all awesome and nice. New corruption mechanics that we can extrapolate on.
You don't want to have a roof as the boss anymore?
Nah, you're not just gonna have a floating roof. The Omnitex is just a small floating roof.
Oh, you're keeping with the theme of vacuum cleaners. Yeah.
Wow,
Standing and then
mistakes
the
were
Roomba.
made. Now we have a minimum. That's a world
Minimum
where you
vacuum
had super
cleaners?
uniques with 1 or 2 skills.
Yeah.
Right. There's only so much you can do with a floating roof. So anyway, and then I don't know, even like Bestiary coming back with something, because we've got all these like, awesome bosses, way grander in scale, and you can do these more grand hunts for them, as opposed to just
that'd
like,
be so
I'm like
good
in a
in this.
city and there's a rare spider, You can just get way more epic and way more involved and with all the new art and so much stuff to like.
A bestiary 2 that's like hunting big beasts and preparing for them and tracking them. That'd be pretty cool.
Exactly.
I'd definitely take some mercenary
Better
action to
cooking.
that. Be a good fit, I feel. All right. Well, there's lots for us to look forward to there. You have some kind of like penned already for adding to the beta.
I mean, all plans can change, but there are absolutely. I mean, look, that we've done things like commissioning art assets and so on. Like we've got
So there's stuff coming
there's
already.
stuff coming along. It's just a question of like when we actually get
That's
there,
committed.
what's it going to look like?
Yep. All right. Let's talk about crafting a little bit because you've done a lot there, and it's
okay.
pretty fundamental to the
Crafting
game, I
for
think. So
yeah,
what's
half
the
an
core
hour.
of what you're
That's
trying
fine.
to do with crafting in Path of Exile 2 compared to Path of Exile 1? Kind of noting that you've really kind of stepped back from
I've
the
lost
idea of,
all the
like,
steam now, it's
reforging
too
an item
much.
many times or scouring it.
So we really want to make it so that you're finding crafting items all the time. You're using those crafting items way more often than you were in PoE1.
Yeah.
That you like the game of like picking something up, like seeing what I could modify it to, like, and then actually equipping those items is just happening way more often.
But-
And there's so many subtle changes around this, like in terms of just like the way that the base mods scale and items and the like things like that, like all the stuff to kind of make it so that as you find new base types and new things, like you've got a reason to craft them. Part of that is making sure that you've got enough of that currency. It actually took us a long time to even get comfortable with the idea of making something like an Exalt drop that often, because there's just this thing in your cemented in your mind of like oh, this is rare, right? Like it's an Exalt, how can it possibly drop like multiple times in Act 1? Like it just seems crazy. But with the way like removing scouring affected so much of the way that we can craft. Like I know that you noted earlier that you can. There's so many more things you're allowed to craft now that you weren't allowed
you
to
can craft
before.
relics, which
Yes,
were
and the reason
uncraftable.
why that's allowed is because without scouring, like those crafts become one-time things, which means that it's actually okay to allow for that stuff. And I think that's opened up a huge amount of stuff. There's so many more types that can be crafted.
It adds so much more value to the dropped item as well.
Exactly. So that stuff has just, I think, opened up a huge amount there. And it also has, and this wasn't necessarily an explicit goal right at the beginning, but it's also meant that the game of like, I'm just going to click again and again as my crafting session is no longer really the meta.
Not just spam re-rolling.
Yeah, exactly. Like everything kind of is something that you want to be able to use.
You are
a few
still
times.
reforging and meta crafting things.
Oh yeah,
You've
yeah.
got
We've still got stuff
annuls.
like that, right? We've
You've
got annuls and you've got
chaos that does
but that stuff
add
is
remove.
higher up. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of more of a later game
It's not
thing. Yeah, exactly. Because you have to think about it after each time. Like, will I improve this? Will I make it worse?
Yeah.
There's stuff to do there, and like the meta crafting that omens can do.
Yeah.
Is also very interesting. Like, there's some pretty powerful stuff there. But once again, we introduced that stuff later on, and so effectively we want to, I guess for lack of a better word, democratize crafting at early levels. Like, make sure that everyone's able to do that stuff, while having the more advanced stuff be kind of a little bit later.
We certainly had a goal at one point where I was like, we're talking with Rishi, and I'm like, if
And
every
personally-
single time we're doing alpha, why
Just
still
gonna
getting
pause again. And personally, I'm not gonna be. Well, I'm gonna be serious about the game. I'm probably gonna make a lot of guides, because I've always wanted to make a guide series on Path of Exile, because I think there's no really good basic guides for a new PoE player today. But I think I'm gonna try and do that for PoE 2 instead. Make short videos, one subject, explain it, and then if they change that, you can make a short video again explaining the change. And keep it really nice and quick, like PoE quickie or something. But I'm not gonna be too serious about optimizing the game. I'm gonna actually just play to have fun and try and make guides for like the regular player, not the top end, because most people are regular players, and I think that's more fun.
the stuff to play. I am like, if I am not seeing and hearing about people using exalts during Act 1, then we have failed, and we need to drop more of them. And so we ended up, like, I would say honestly, in the last month, we have like over like 8 to 10 times the amount of currency dropping, and there's the cool things about it as well, which are the subtle things, like a boss is way more likely to drop the higher tier currencies and stuff, because again, rarity affects that
rarity
as well
matters,
now. So you're like way more incentivized to go and kill bosses to get them, and there's heaps of awesome stuff around there. But we're actually now finding people are exalting gear during the campaign, throwing it on weapons and building weapons from scratch that you find are very good. Transmute, Org, Regal, Exalt. That process is like...
Transmute, or
That's how I wanna
Exalt
play
is
the
like
game.
a thing that you're doing often. and like enjoy, and like when you find good bases and you do stuff with that.
I can speak to that experience. So I've played probably 6-ish hours. I'm most of the way through Act 2 on my mercenary, and I've found maybe 6 or 7 exalts. I took a ring from like a 1 blue stat ring that had a nice roll, maybe a nice life roll or something, and crafted it up to 6 property rare. And I crafted a crossbow that I found with good sockets that had a good damage roll in it, and I took that to 6 properties with multiple damage mods. And I'm like, each time that power was going up, and so I was doing that.
It feels good.
I felt like the bottleneck was Regals, which was actually kind of interesting because I don't know if that's intentional or just luck, because I did really have to think about which blue items were good enough to take to a rare, so that I could then put my exalts on them.
So you get more of those by disenchanting rares.
Yeah, they
so
are
effectively-
farmable.
So they are farmable, which is completely intentional.
Yep.
We want to make sure that like if you don't have enough of those, like so generally speaking, it's like you're going to want to keep like I feel like once you get like more than like 5 or 6 transmutes, then you stop disenchanting blues and start selling them instead.
Yep.
And the same thing can be true also for Regals, where it's like, okay, once you've got more than a certain amount, then you're like, okay, I can stop having to disenchant this stuff and kind of switch over. But the nice thing is like when you don't have enough, there is a way to get them, which I think is really important.
We will probably just keep everything in the stash. If you're like me, played PoE1 when it got released, there wasn't any currency tabs and anything. I have 130 just regular stash tabs.
And the same is true with the socket currency as well, where it's like, when you don't have
If
enough,
that
you can start
transfers
salvaging.
over
I
to
know you were
PoE2, I
telling
can
me you were
just fill
buying
those
stuff
up
from the vendor
and
with
sell
sockets
for
and
the
all that
thing
stuff.
I need.
Yeah,
If I need coin, I can sell it for coin.
So that stuff, it's just really nice to have. For
And
people to have the
disenchant if I
ability
need to disenchant.
to get that stuff when they need it. And so it's nice that like
That's
all
probably
that really
gonna
basic
happen.
stuff of just like getting items to better tiers and it is now way easier to get. And that solved a problem that we had through quite a lot of the betas, where people were saying they didn't feel like they had enough control, like they didn't feel like they had a way to advance their character when they needed to be able to solve specific problems. And I think the socket thing really has helped a lot with that now, because now we have a way finally to be like, okay, if I need a bunch of fire resist, there is a way to get that, and I've got the tools to do it, and I've got items I can use to do this stuff. So that has helped a huge amount, I think, of solving those like issues that come up with your character.
And this is to confirm how you've solved bench crafting. The question of
So
that.
we went through so many iterations of bench stuff. It was like a huge thing. We implemented tons of UI. Like there was tons of wasted time there implementing crafting bench things. The problem that we had was that the systems that we were making, it's like we could balance them in the ways the players were happy with, and then the designers were very unhappy. Or we could balance them the way the designers were happy with and the players were unhappy. And it's like when you've got a system where like you're fighting the players for how the balance should be, like you can tell that means you have a system that is bad. But I think we were very I myself honestly was too slow to recognize the fact that a complete overhaul was needed. And then at some point the socket stuff originally came from the Varlorb. Like it was designed there. And then at some point, I don't know who came up with it. I think it might have just been you, who said like, why don't we just
Rishi.
Rishi thought of that. Okay, yeah. So Rishi thought of the idea of like, hey, what if we just put sockets, in early game? What if you got them in Act 1? What if you had runes that would let you get the basic boss as the way of solving the remedial crafting problem? And so then suddenly, as soon as we do that, it's like, oh,
Some items can have 2 runes in them. They can make small rune words, so you can drop 2 specific runes, and then if you put them into like the chest, you get specific special stats depending on which 2 you put in. That could be pretty cool.
Like I'm happy, players are happy, everyone's happy,
And the 2-handers.
So that means we have a good system that is
So,
working, and
as I said,
and gets those good feelings. So
dual wielding,
that I think was a real win.
two-handed
weapons. I love how that system is feeling at the moment.
That's
So the bench was
2
achieving
mazes.
2 things kind
like
of in
that's
its
what
way,
I'm gonna be playing.
which
Dual
was
wield maze,
or maybe even 3.
unless axis.
Gear customization for one, like you take an
broken
item and you can
or
do
sword.
something more to it,
Sure.
firstly. And then you've got the problem fixing of like,
Yes.
I need a bit more fire
Yes,
resistance.
yes.
And then the third thing was like the meta crafts.
Yeah.
So you've handled those each in different ways.
Exactly,
You've got the runes, which do the first 2 things, the customization and the problem fixing. So early on,
But I think
runes
for the
are
customization,
resistance stuff.
it's the sorry, what do you call them? The soul cores. Like the runes are more about the kind of like I need to fix resistances, whereas the soul cores are more about like I want to customize my items in different ways than what I would otherwise normally be able to do. And then of course you got the omens to solve the metacrafting problem.
Yeah.
So we effectively
And
moved all that stuff around. And
as well,
essences,
I
of course,
feel,
yes, of course.
Yeah.
So essence is what they allow you to do is get 2 deterministic mods.
Yeah.
So because you can upgrade to blue, but you can also upgrade from blue to rare with an essence as well. So that lets you kind of get some of that stuff, and then plus some of the omen things you can. Yeah, there's stuff you can do there. That
So you can find Oh, you need to go to from normal to magic with essence. Then you can augment, and then if you have 2 good stats, you can guarantee the 3rd good stat. Yeah. So you can get 3 good stats decently easy. Interesting.
is I think going to be pretty interesting.
And that's just at the start of release.
Yeah, because obviously there's going to be more, of course, as we add more things. So yeah.
So I was worried that some of the changes you're making might move us away from some of the like deep impactful crafting that we have, but it sounds like you are still allowing like powerful meta crafting and the ability to make like a really good item
for sure,
but you're also making sure that
and this is just annoying. This is something that's still left from Harvest. People are insanely, I don't even know why we think of crafting items like we do these days. Before Harvest, no one was ever not even thinking about meta crafting in the way that we do today. And I think Harvest destroyed PoE's crafting system. That's why we are where we are today, where everyone thinks it's a given that you could have a perfect gear in like almost every slot. I think that's just stupid. The combination is unnecessary. I don't even know why people. Yeah, it's a lingering thing from Harvest. That's my least favorite league because I think that destroyed PoE. It destroyed my PoE, the PoE that I liked the most. The more you play the game, you find cool items. You have very, very RNG way of crafting items. That's the PoE that I started to play and the PoE that I liked the most. So fuck Harvest.
that like the physical item itself that you find matters more.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like the more subtle,
that's what it's all about, right?
There's so much more going on. I think just like clever things we've done with the item system as well. Like one of the things I love that we did is we've made it so that so we've got blue and yellow chests you can find now, and we've changed the world generation so that if a dead end is generated, the chance that you get a rare chest there is way higher. So effectively, if a rare chest will spawn in the area, then it will choose dead ends first to go there.
You feel better about the dead ends
yeah,
when that
effectively. So
happens.
like that means that we effectively mean that like when like it makes the world feel like, you know, as far as item drops go, that like, oh, like it feels intentional, right? Like, oh, I went down this into this dead end room, but look, there was a rare chest there, so I feel happy about it. You know, like that kind of thing is really cool. So there's things like that, but there's also the way that so we've alluded to it a few times, but the way that rarity now works, where the mods get better as rarity increases, and also things like the you get better currency rather than just
Yeah.
you know, it means we don't have to have like the spam of items that's like crazy. Like you actually feel like that you kill a boss and it drops good shit, as opposed to just lots of shit. You know that's I'm a big fan of how this feels. I think it's a lot better. But it does mean though, of course, if you're a PoE1 player and you see a boss kill, like the number of like the expectation of like, because a PoE1 player sees like looks at the amount of spam on the screen to some level as the way of like knowing how good the drops were. Now, of course, you got item filters and everything.
We
to
have
kind of improve
quantity
that.
brain rot.
Yeah, exactly. So exactly, that is a good way of putting it. It really is more about like, are the items actually good? Like, ideally, you kill a boss and you pick every item it drops up.
Yeah.
You know, like that is to me is a win, and I think we're basically getting at that point.
Mm-hmm. I quite like how the exploration systems and that as well, with the chests down dead ends and things like that, acts as a player leveler in some ways. Where
Yes.
like a
The more
player
you
who's
explore,
struggling,
the more
is
you explore, the
exploring more.
more stuff you'll find, and that's
Yeah.
true as well for the optional encounters around the place as well.
Yeah.
If you're struggling, go fight some optional content. There'll be stuff there that can drop, and and you will definitely find more
there's
things. And
lots of guaranteed rare
Yeah.
Rare items here and there,
Exactly.
and like, certain like that.
Yeah.
This little boss here will drop a rare caster item, and like heaps of stuff.
And the funny thing about that is that stuff came about a little bit from the fact that we actually had a problem where people were just face tanking bosses and dying over and over again.
Yeah.
And they keep on respawning, and they would never be like, "Oh, I'm going to go away and actually find some other stuff." And so I was thinking for a long time about like, well, why is it that in other games that people don't do that? Like, if I'm playing Elden Ring and I die to a boss 10 times, I'm not just gonna just continue doing that. I'm gonna be like, oh, maybe I'll go do something else for a while. So we realized that the map, like the idea of just there's lots of stuff to find, is actually a really important part of that. So in PoE 2 now, one of the recent things, and it's taken a lot of work from people to get this working, but now all of that you can see all this sort of weird side encounters that have specific drops on the map.
Yeah.
And that means that if you're having
specific
trouble with the boss,
drops,
you're like, oh, you
okay.
know what, I'm just gonna go do some other stuff. And then you'll come back and you will be powerful enough to kill the boss much more easily because you do absolutely find the rewarding things.
Yeah, there's a little chest on there or a little campsite. that says
Or
that
there's
there.
lots of little hard-coded
Oh.
drops from specific bosses. The hard-coded drops, they only drop one time, so you can't just farm them endlessly.
Yeah.
But effectively, if you go do all that side content and you check it all off, you'll get some very rewarding stuff.
Yeah, you got some pretty clever systems there. And I definitely noted I was using the map thing a lot to be like, oh, well, to be completionist about it a bit. But also, yeah, just being aware of like, oh, cool, there's some good stuff in this zone that I can come and find. And I think we figured out that some of that stuff reveals after you find the waypoint in a zone.
I think
for
that's how it
example.
works. Is that?
Yeah, it's either there's a few. So it's like either because an NPC told you about an area, in which case it just happens to be revealed,
Cool.
or at the very least, yes, when you get there. Generally, it's just when you get there you see everything.
Okay.
But yeah, there's a few different conditions that will reveal everything. It kind of depends. Like a lot of people just click through the dialogue, so they'll never know the NPC told them, but they maybe
I was
did.
checking my map kind of like when I went into a zone, and then maybe afterwards to see if there was anything.
But like
interesting
you
I
never
missed.
get to an area and don't see some unless they are like very obviously hidden intentional secrets that
There's nearly
they
something
might
everywhere.
they might be there, they might not
Yes,
be.
I found
That's-
half of your key for your secret quest.
Oh yeah, don't worry about that.
So pivoting into economy and trading, the exchange from Path of Exile's one experiment recently, we got a chance to actually try that live in the field, and it seems from the player's perspective it was a smash hit.
Definitely for us as well.
Yeah, okay.
Solved a lot.
Great.
We're 100% on board with that. It's very good.
Was
Yeah.
the least stressful league I ever played. I mean,
Same.
what normally caused almost all
Literally
the
my
anger and
favourite.
friction for me was
Yes.
especially bulk trading. It
Incredible.
was horrible, and I
So
was just
good.
like, oh, this is like a dream come true.
Myself and so many other players, I feel like we're more engaged in Endgame. We were able to do the thing we wanted to do more, and we're just less aggravated on a moment-to-moment basis. It's good. So, do you take that then as as a big positive for it going into Path of Exile 2?
100%.
And how do you feel like it adapts to the game being quite different in the end? Because they are pretty different games. Like the economy works a bit differently.
I mean, honestly, I think it will just work. I mean, look, we have no idea what the trade values will settle on and how that'll end up. But
Is it going to be chaos? Is it going to be exalts?
but ultimately, I think that the trades effectively Settlers was a test of what the economy will be like in PoE 2, and to some extent because of the way that we did the gold and everything.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty confident that that's going to be okay. But obviously, you never know, right? Like when lots of people hit the economy, what can happen? Hopefully, we don't cause
wonder what
horrible
the way-
hyperinflation or have some horrible issue like that. But
I wonder what they will do with Colgar now in the auction house for the future of PoE 1. They must keep it in, I think.
I guess partly this is what an early access is to find out, right? Like whether there's any issues like that.
Was there any
economy testing?
Was there any surprises with that or with gold in terms of how things panned out?
Thankfully not, honestly. Like
Right.
we were worried, but thankfully none of the horrible situations came to pass with that, and it ended up working just fine. So it went great.
Who'd have thought 10 years later we'd be back here saying, you know what, gold was a good idea. We just had to do it right.
Exactly.
Because I remember 10 years ago,
it's
we're
funny,
like,
but it's
this
funny.
game's brilliant. It has no gold. Stupid gold.
But the funny thing is I don't think we would have arrived at the way gold is now if we had had it in the first place.
Yeah.
Like the non-tradability of it, like using it as a sort of marker for how much play you've done.
Yeah.
I don't think that we would have ever had that way if we hadn't arrived from here. So
Yeah.
I think that path dependency kind of did matter.
Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The paths we weave. So, how likely then, based on just how successful it is, are you to want to expand the like exchanges capabilities to like other things like maps or waystones or even gear? Or...
Well, I mean, look, I'm interested in this, but I don't think it's necessary right now. So we're not going in early access, at least. We're not going to launch with any expanded stuff in that way. But I guess I do want to sort of see how it works, and I'm interested in potentially trying something like that in the future. I just don't like the currency exchange was like 90% of the problem.
Yeah.
And so fixing that like fixed a lot of the like it seemed like we would need to do more initially, and then maybe now it's seeming like maybe we don't, but I still want to experiment with it potentially. So I'm interested to see how it goes. But the currency exchange definitely helped a vast amount.
Those were the annoying trades.
Yeah, they
most
were
of the
for
time.
sure. They were.
Yep, definitely.
Great. So we've had some so this is a tricky question to answer, especially if we could just scroll down. So what are you aiming for in terms of Path of Exile 2's kind of like personal player economy and progression? So how much resources you're acquiring, how you're using them, but also how much are you getting from trade versus from yourself?
I mean,
Solo
this is a tricky
self-found.
question, but I mean, I think that really the feeling of like being able to trade is super important. So being able to get that stuff, I think, is good. Like not everyone wants to do that. You need to be able to progress through the game well without having to do much trade. But I do think that look, it's definitely going to be the case that if you're playing in a trade league, you're going to have the ability to
It accelerates
you
everything,
very significantly, and that's the case, and it will continue to be the case. And
Yeah.
like we are a game that embraces trade.
Yeah,
right?
well,
Like
I think the DNA of Path of Exile 1 is very much that like it is a game about economy and trade.
100%.
And
So, yeah.
for some people, getting rich is their main motivator.
100%. So effectively, yeah. So I mean, that will absolutely be a factor. And look, like I think that the feeling of that will probably end up feeling quite similar to PoE 1 in that regard.
Yeah.
I think that's what that's the type of game we're making.
Yeah. Do you think it's that said though? Do you think it is in some ways better for a solo self-found sort of experience?
I mean, I simply because, again, as we talked about, we're dropping a lot more currency that we expect you to use on gear,
exactly.
as opposed to save till end game for one, and then by end game, like we don't have Kirak mods costing, that kind of stuff that all costs chaos, and you don't have like the meta mods costing divines and all that, right? They're all different items. You're like, I want meta mod crafting. There's a ritual. I'm
know
gonna
where
go
to get
get
them
it
as well.
right? So you're not just like having to, I'm blocked behind this thing because I need so many divines and I can't get that because I'm solo self-found, and farming divines is not exactly, beyond trivial. So, there's a number of ways there where I'd say it is honestly a much better solo self-found experience. But, each to their own, that to be seen, and,
I'm going to be
There'll
playing
a separate
trade
solo
for
self-found
once
mode,
in PoE 2.
presumably even potentially beta launch or in the future.
It is our intention to have hardcore and solo
We'll have,
self-found.
we'll have both of them.
Right. Cool.
Yeah, I wouldn't play hardcore for your first round, honestly, because you're likely to die. Like once you learn the boss mechanics, it should be fine. But
Someone's gonna.
First time, it's gonna be tricky.
Couch co-op hardcore, and you get to see your friend die right next to you. That's the true dream.
Actually,
And you're like,
hang on, wait. In couch co-op hardcore, do we still lock the camera so you can't walk away from your friend?
No, we put you back to
Put you
solo.
back to solo. Okay, great, good. That's good. Good to know. It's like you have
But you just-
You have to have a mourning period of about 30 seconds.
Right.
Before you
But you're
move.
just like, all right, you can go home now. We're like, go. You can,
Yeah.
See ya.
What do you do?
Yeah, that's a devastating moment. I did lose my place there. Yeah, I think we mentioned the co-op support and everything. And we'll scroll down and take some of the additional questions here. Excellent, thanks. Will there be a penalty for individual party member dying when grouping up for bosses on that note then? It seems weird that the boss straight up resets when playing solo, but when playing in a group, nothing happens if a party member dies.
So tell us about the rules
Yeah, well,
now
how
that we
does that
have, because
work?
I know you've changed them recently.
So, bosses are obviously harder for having more people.
Yep.
Less crowd controls, things like obviously more life, and I'm not just saying double life, more than double life, right? It does get more than twice as hard, or more than in players as hard. So yes, you could argue, okay, we have reviving as an advantage. Well, yes, it does. It does take time to revive, and if your friend dies early and you're unable to revive them because you're constantly being interrupted, well,
From what I saw, it's pretty hard to
you're
pull
not
off unless
having
you
a fun time.
get a big stun or something.
Another change that we made recently is, of course, for each revived. Between each set of checkpoints, every time you have to revive them, the revive takes longer subsequent times.
So that's important because it just means that if you're like, you can't revive spam anymore because it's going to take longer and longer each time. But then when you go to a checkpoint, that resets. So like you're back to normal
Now,
again.
in endgame maps, you cannot revive each other. Death is a consequence.
Yeah.
Ah.
I was going
And
to
then-
ask actually about like endgame maps and what is the rule for dying in endgame map? Is it one portal deal now, not 6 portals?
Well, you still have 6 portals, so you can have your party members, but death.
And you can leave and come back as long as you don't die.
okay.
So you can take items out, but a death will end that map for you.
Yeah. And to remind people, the if you like log out or the server crashes or something like, not that that's going to happen, then the game pauses. So when you boot the game back up and log back in, you'll be still in your map, right?
And also, even we've also now have it so that if you just Alt F4 the game at a random time, you'll actually, even if you come back like the next day. Because for example, you might have rage quit. You will appear back at the checkpoint you were at. So if you are like fighting a boss, you die a bunch of times. You're like, crap. Alt F4. You come back, you're going to be right there at the boss checkpoint again.
That part is campaign specific because there are no checkpoints in maps.
Yeah, non-maps. But in for the campaign though, and that honestly has helped a lot. Like there were so many. I think it really did cause new players to have problems in PoE1 where they felt like they just lost track of where the hell they even were when they came back after a session. If like they might have not got waypoints for certain times or things like that. Like you now can't have the situation where you log back in and you're like, oh, I forgot like 3 waypoints in a row and now I'm like freaking miles away from where I was, which I think happened to new players fairly frequently.
Yep.
I'm glad in a world where everyone's becoming a Souls-like that you guys didn't do the running back to the boss segment of gameplay,
right.
and you just kind of jump back in
Yeah.
and have another crack. Appreciate that.
So effectively like that's nice to just have the save checkpoints to your character, which I think is a nice one.
Were there any other mechanics around there? Reviving, well, obviously in hardcore you're dead. That's the drill.
It's irrelevant at that point.
So your maps almost embraces a kind of semi-hardcore mentality there, where there is actual cost. Like we went through so many iterations here, where it's like, okay, like the moment that you have to spend something of economic value to do the attempt, hence a map item, and especially if it's got breaches and all this content that's coming from precursor tablets, all of this stuff is worth stuff. So you all of a sudden have heaps of stuff on the line, and then you don't want to be in a position where you're like, I need to bring in some people to do this because I'm not going to risk that value. So that's why we just were like in maps, no reviving. It's just like, yeah, sure. You still can always bring in any context someone way more powerful than you to carry things, right? That's the benefit of multiplayer. But feeling like you have to do this thing because then they can just keep reviving you so you can get all the rewards. Like we're trying to get away from all of that. Otherwise you get this weird thing where like you're often always too scared to do the thing. Yeah. Now you're scared, but everyone's scared and it's fine, and you don't feel like you're like, okay, you have to go in with a sense of confidence to like, I can definitely do this thing. And so it's just a little bit less fear when it comes to all of a sudden doing that.
That's much better in the context of the fact that you can pause the game if your cat's on fire or if the server crashes or something, that you just paused and you can jump back in as well. You're failing because of your own faults.
Yep. Now, it is worth noting in multiplayer, we do have a thing, of course, with respawn at checkpoints as an option. So if a player dies and you don't want to die, don't want to finish the fight out, you can both choose to respawn at checkpoint, and then it will just create a new instance. Cool. You don't have to die to do it, and you don't have to log out and do any shenanigans like that. You can just press escape, hit respawn at checkpoint. It'll ask other players to confirm, and then it moves you all to the new area.
Cool, excellent. I didn't want to go super on it because we've definitely talked about it before, but click to move versus WSD, it's definitely been asked about a bit. So there's been plenty of reports about WSD being amazing. Personally, I've been using it a ton and really enjoying it. I know you've said a lot of people around the office have given it a try and adapted to that, but it has raised the point for people that feel like they're still very much against that for whatever reason, or maybe that they literally only have one hand and want to use click to move still. How does it stack up? How does click to move still stack up now?
I think honestly it's fine. Like it's not been a problem.
There was a time where every time I go to sit down at a developer's computer, there'd be in WSD, and just because it's a little bit easier to move around again or whatever. But lately, I'd say now it's back to almost every designer's computer I sit back down at to go play. They're back in click to move.
Interesting.
Yep, it's gone full tilt the other way.
Interesting.
And I'm always like, change
Wonder
it
why
back.
that is.
But even watching Octavian play on click to move,
He's a click to move player,
yeah, he's
You have a
100%
few
click to move. He
click-to-move
is
there.
very proficient with that.
Yeah.
With it, like
That'll be reassuring for, I think, some of the people that are worried about being forced into WASD, even though it is obviously playing so well by all accounts. That's very good
Melee's
then.
probably
And
better
Octavian's
with
often
click to
doing the
move.
demonstrations
Yes.
for your
Yeah.
live things too, so you'll be able to see that even.
I have to force him to play WSD sometimes because I'm like, I think the Mercenary looks so much better with WSD just visually.
Yeah.
I'll tell him to.
It does feel very good on the Mercenary.
Yeah,
You've got
yeah.
that kind of like stalking through, especially with that kind of like preparational
Yeah,
tactical
yeah.
play style.
Yeah,
It's good. I'm loving it so far. We did already talk about the skin transfers. Could we scroll down to any additional questions that we have? I feel like I don't even know how long we've been going for, but
I mean,
feeling
it's
the
a
physical
while. We're
fatigue
getting
creep in at this
yeah,
point.
Yeah, exactly. we've been rolling. Yeah, yeah.
People asking if there's going to be anything like challenges or challenge rewards in the early access.
not at
beta?
first,
Yeah.
no.
We will do it later though.
Did I ask about races, events, and private leagues?
I think not initially, but we will do it later for sure.
Cool.
I think I'm not sure what happened because I think the issue was that the private league interface was like on the PoE1 site and we had to do some work and something like that. It wouldn't be
Yeah.
far away though. Like it won't take us
Yeah,
that long before we get to it. Like
Would be
I
nice
can't
if they
exactly
work on
remember
some
either,
sort of
but
way
yeah,
of
it wouldn't
making
be, private
races and
leagues in
stuff.
particular wouldn't be far away.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we'll have them, just not like right initially potentially.
And I think I did miss this actually. So cluster jewels are a thing or not a thing? Are they've been kind of replaced by those
Yeah,
radius?
we replaced them with that almost like rollable timeless jewel kind of thing.
Yeah, that's cool.
At least for now, there's like so much passive tree there, and the jewels accomplish the kind of off-build thing anyway.
You
Like,
hardly need to add the extra passive trees on your passive trees
yes,
yet.
yes, we do. Yeah,
That's
we
after launch.
We made the passive tree implicitly bigger, so you know.
The cluster
but
jewels are in the tree already.
That's again, I talk about like year 3 features. That's around a like year 3 to year 5 feature as well. So
Yeah. We've got another decade of what we had with Path of Exile
Yeah.
1 to look forward to for Path of Exile 2, hopefully, before we start worrying about Path of Exile 3, maybe.
Jeez.
You go, just start thinking, about
give
that.
us a little while.
yeah.
We so I guess to just finish us off for today then, do you guys have a recommendation or of what is the best class to play in the beta?
I mean, that's
Warrior.
a very hard one. Honestly, like so.
There's so many choices now.
There are.
Or
So,
the
okay.
gem guy.
If we're going by the numbers,
Oh, yeah.
if we go by player satisfaction reports on per class, we break it down from the betas.
I mean, this is good technical information here.
Then that means the monk is very interesting because the monk is the class that dies the most often. But it's
Yeah.
also the class that when people play it, they have the highest satisfaction
That's
level by a very,
fascinating.
very tiny margin that compares the others.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it is like glass cannon, like it's very fast, but you have to,
Yeah.
you
I
have
mean,
to retreat and move in and out. So,
I fell in love with the monk
that's,
playing it. It looks like it's gotten a little better.
yeah,
I
yeah,
would
that's
say.
interesting. But I think if you're a new player, then the mercenary, if you're like used to shooters and stuff, I think playing the mercenary could be a good win. Like I really love that class. It's
I don't
really
know.
cool.
Like I've been loving the mercenary, but to me it feels like you need to really be considering each engagement a lot more. It's a bit more
Maybe.
tactical.
Maybe, I
and
don't know. Like
considered.
I like it.
you don't have that
I really
ability
like
to
that.
correct if you
But
make a mistake.
honestly, like I mean, I go through favorite classes all the time. Whenever I change to play a different class, it becomes my favorite.
That's my current favorite.
So
playing.
it's just whatever
Nice.
whatever I'm playing tends to be the thing. So yeah, right now I'm doing a mercenary playthrough, so that's probably why I'm into that. But yeah, it's I'm not sure if you've got a similar.
No, you were talking about the numbers as well. It was interesting that monk and then warrior had the highest
Yes,
satisfaction levels.
Warrior's
and I was
next,
like,
by the way. Technically, if you're
I was
looking
like,
for
that's pretty good. That's
Yeah, yeah.
2 melee classes.
exactly,
How good is that?
exactly.
That's a win.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, that's something going on. I mean, they were dying a lot more at the time, but
yeah, yeah.
It's such a change from like, especially early Path of Exile 1. Like, it's gotten a little better in modern days, but still.
I mean,
melee.
I just have a like real desire to freeze time, so I just want to go sorceress and then just go. I don't know what
It's good
skills
to hear some
I'll play.
sorceress love. I feel like she's not getting enough
I
attention.
don't know what I don't know what skills I'll play, but I definitely just want to be able to freeze time. So
Yeah.
it just feels cool.
All right. So you could be playing a crossbow build anyway.
Yeah, I might be a crossbow time freezer. I don't know. We'll see what's going on.
Yeah, all right. I noted. I liked that. I noted that our mercenaries were very different as well. I was playing full Grenader. You were.
I was doing
combo.
the freeze
Yeah.
shotgun.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know
nice
what.
to do.
Yeah, Some sort of monk trigger build, obviously, is always just going to be fun to
Yeah,
play
they have
around
so many
with
of
and,
those like stacking effects, the wind
Yeah.
and the ice coming off it, and the ascendancy showed some more as well. Oof.
just see how far that can be pushed and how many spells can I get to trigger per second.
Monk does seem good for that. Alrighty. Well, thank you very much for your time, both of
you.
you. For I don't even know how long.
That was a mammoth session. I think we're coming up to
Yes.
1 o'clock here, so
There's still,
you know,
there's still lots to talk about, but I think we just need some time to digest.
For sure. Well, thankfully we didn't have everyone saying patch notes when this time.
So good.
So that means
So
we can actually
good.
have a conversation.
There's no pressure on us to like wrap it up,
Yeah,
boys.
exactly. That's good.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the Q&A. That's a good day.
They want patch notes now.
Oh, patch notes.
Well done.
It's not a patch.
Thank you.
It's a launch.
Exactly,
You can't have patch
exactly.
Where's the
notes.
launch notes?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, and
No,
thank you very much.
Thanks
Great.
heaps. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's been an epic journey. It's kind of surreal. And
Yeah.
it's only the start of another journey, really. So,
That's it.
yeah,
Can't wait to play.
it's cool.
Excellent.
I mean, I'm going to go play more now, but
Yeah, it's true. Sorry. I got to go fix bosses going up elevators and
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just pre-bug testing. So.
All right.
I assume we've faded out and cut.
Hopefully.
you never know.
Hopefully.
Wow, okay. Well, the hype for PvE2 is real. Nice. I don't even know what to say. Play Path of Exile 2 when it gets released. That's probably it. Everyone should try it. It's gonna be great. I'm probably gonna be playing Warrior or the Gem guy with dual wielding two-handed maces or axes or swords or something. That Gem guy that seems to be like a general good character, generally good thing. It depends on how good quality is for gems and stuff like that, and yeah, all that shit. Yeah. Definitely dual wielding two-handers. That's a no-brainer. Anyway, thanks for the maybe one person even watching this. It's gonna be 4 hours to upload. Yeah. Stay awesome. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, comment, support. Bye for now.